There's a whole host of things going through my mind, and just trying to figure out where I want to start. Thank you to the youth for leading us, and particularly in those songs. I think we're going to begin a study this morning in the book of Joshua that's going to happen for a number of weeks now, and we could almost sing at least that last song, maybe all those songs every week, because it summarizes, I think, pretty well the book and story of Joshua and the Israelites as it's recorded there. God was fighting all the battles, and the battles that God didn't fight for the Israelites, it didn't go well. But the ones that he was, as long as they were following his instruction and his lead, they were already won before the Israelites even did anything. And there's just so much confidence, I think, that at least I gain from that type of a declaration. It's the same is true for you and I, that following the Lord's leading in his direction, the battle's already been won. And we're still fighting, but we're already overcomers. And so it gets me fired up. I think I said before, if there was a pump up music for church that you wanted to run out of the tunnel and go fight or go play a sporting event, that'd be like the theme song for the church. At least that's how I feel about it. So thank you very much for leading. Like I said, we are going to begin in Joshua, and we're going to begin at the beginning, because that makes logical sense. And part of the reason why we're moving to Joshua is, in some ways, to kind of come back to the theme of the year. We haven't talked about it specifically a lot, and we're not going to, at least I'm not going to try to force the theme on the book of Joshua, but I think it naturally will come out, at least in a few spots. Maybe not everywhere, but in a few spots. And this morning we're going to tie it, I think, rightly to our theme of the year, and that is this generation to generation. And a couple of things just to remember, at least one thing to remember. Back in January when we introduced the theme, one thing that I mentioned was that as we think generationally, one of the things we have to understand is there's good and there's bad generational blessings and curses and sins that we carry with us, that we deal with even to this day. And I can recognize a lot of, as I look generationally over my past and how it's impacted me, overall I've had a very positive, and I'm very blessed by the generational influences of my grandparents and my parents and so forth. But that's not to say that I don't carry some baggage from my parents and my grandparents also. And so there's good and bad that comes with it. And one of the things that I think is important for us to remember and recognize as we sort of apply this theme or look at it is that generationally people change. Generations come, generations go, and they come and go rather quickly. I've said this before too, that I never knew in person my great-grandparents. And so for me, they're only talked about. And so certainly when I'm gone, when I die, that generation is forgotten. My children have no connection to that. And so in the matter of 2 or 3 generations, you can be completely forgotten. And, there's scripture that talks about how quickly we're forgotten. We spring up as flowers and we're gone the next day. Apart from a few individuals that might be written down in the history books, but that's probably not going to be me. And so in a number of generations, certainly my legacy can live on, but people aren't probably going to remember who I was. And so generationally, people change. They come and they go. And even in the course of a lifetime, people change. Their beliefs, who they are, how they act. We're changing individuals. But what we need to understand and what is important for us to remember is that God doesn't change. The God that we read about in Scripture is the same consistently all throughout. And he's the same God now as he was then, and he will be the same God tomorrow and forever that he was. And that's an important foundation for us to have as we think generationally, because not to get ahead of myself, but I'll say it again at the end. We, by nature, project onto God, I think, things, our generational pains and traumas, because people have failed us. When we reflect generationally, maybe people have failed us because people are changing and they're people. And we project those kind of things on God, which kind of breaks our trust with God. And we're going to talk about that a little bit this morning, and that's where we're going to kind of end up on this point. So I'm giving you the ending at the beginning. But we have to remember that God isn't the one that has changed, and He's not the one that's failed you. And so something to consider as we begin our journey here this morning. I'm curious, and maybe this is something you can discuss in your Sunday school classes or just think about for yourself. Have you ever felt like you've been living in somebody else's shadow? Whether you're a younger sibling, this is probably common for younger siblings. I'm the oldest, so it's different for me. I'm certain my younger brothers and sisters would probably say this, that they grew up in my shadow, and we say things as parents like, I wish you would be more like so-and-so, or so-and-so does this, and so we see that in family dynamics. Or maybe you've stepped into a position, you've taken over a business or a role that someone else had previously filled, and the person who filled it before you was great. They did a great job. And now you're in that position. And again, the comments are like, well, so-and-so always did it this way. And so we feel like we're always trying to measure up to whoever was before us. And we just can't get out from underneath that shadow, so to speak. Well, enter Joshua into the situation that we find him here in Joshua chapter 1. And just to kind of paint this picture, I'm not sure that, I know Joshua was human, like you and I, and so I'm guessing that he felt some of this pressure. I think it's reasonable to assume that he felt some of those same pressures that we feel when we step into roles that someone prior to us had occupied, or that kind of that idea of the person before us did it this way, and we need to measure up in the same way. We need to be that person. And so I think Joshua had every reason to probably feel that way. Whether he did or not, I guess we can't know for sure, but I'm assuming, being human like the rest of us, that he probably did. And to kind of paint that picture, let's go, if you want, you can go with me to Numbers chapter 27 and verse 12. This is the beginning of the succession plan from Moses to Joshua. This is Numbers 27, verse 12. The Lord said to Moses, "Go up this mountain in the Abarim range and see the land I have given the Israelites. After you have seen it, you too will be gathered to your people as your brother Aaron was. For when the community rebelled at the waters of the desert of Zin, both of you disobeyed my command to honor me as holy before their eyes." Moses said to the Lord, "May the Lord, the God who gives breath to all living things, appoint someone over this community to go out and come in before them, one who will lead them out and bring them in, so the Lord's people will not be like sheep without a shepherd." So the Lord said to Moses, "Take Joshua, son of Nun, a man in whom is the spirit of leadership, and lay your hand on him. Have him stand before Eleazar the priest and the entire assembly, and commission him in their presence. Give him some of your authority, so the whole Israelite community will obey him." So this is the plan. Moses can't go into the promised land because of what had happened, and so he's concerned about he doesn't want the people to be without a leader, and so him and God, I guess, come up with this plan. Joshua will be the next leader. And Joshua is described as a man who has the spirit of leadership. So he has some abilities as a leader, as a warrior. We're going to see in just a moment this phrase used again, but it's the spirit of wisdom. And that term spirit is essentially the same as what we use same meaning, phraseology as we use when we say Holy Spirit, Spirit of God. that type of thing. The word for it is ruach, and you really got to kind of like clear your throat when you say it. If you have a student in the Shine group, they'll know this because we've talked about this. The Spirit, it's like a wind, or I like the term energy. It's an energy or a wind. It's defined as the animating force of a person. The animating force of a person is associated with the power of God. So this ruach that is moving and blowing is energizing us. And Joshua is described as a man who was energized or animated by the Spirit. Okay, so he has that going for him, and I think that's key. That he has this Spirit, this energy within him. I also find it fascinating that he's only to be given some of Moses' authority. Only some of Moses' authority. And so now let's get to Deuteronomy chapter 34. Right at the end, before we head into the book of Joshua, here is what the transition actually looks like. And here is where I think, if Joshua were like me at least, he would be experiencing a tremendous amount of pressure as he steps into this role of leader. Here's how Deuteronomy ends. Deuteronomy chapter 34, and we're going to begin in verse 9. Now Joshua son of Nun was filled with the spirit of wisdom, because Moses had laid his hands on him. So the Israelites listened to him and did what the Lord had commanded Moses. And here's what they say about Moses. Since then, no prophet has risen in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face, who did all those signs and wonders the Lord sent him to do in Egypt, to Pharaoh and to all his officials and to his whole land. For no one has ever shown the mighty power or performed the awesome deeds that Moses did in the sight of all Israel. Essentially, there's no one like Moses. There's never been anyone like Moses, and there's probably never going to be anyone like Moses. So, good luck, Joshua, filling those shoes. That seems like a tremendous weight, at least as I put myself in that position. But I think, again, the key here is this spirit filling, this energy that Joshua has. He's animated by the Spirit, and that's really going to be the key, and it's the key for us. And that's not the road I'm going to go down this morning, but it's important for us to remember. So that is the context in which Joshua enters the scene as the leader of the Israelites. Now let's read Joshua chapter 1. We're going to read the whole chapter, and then I'll come back through and make a few observations. Joshua chapter 1. After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua, son of Nun, Moses' aide, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now then, you and all these people get ready to cross the Jordan River into the land I am about to give them, to the Israelites. I will give you every place where you set your foot, as I promised Moses. Your territory will extend from the desert to Lebanon, and from the great river, the Euphrates, all the Hittite country to the Mediterranean Sea in the west. No one will be able to stand against you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will never leave you nor forsake you. Be strong and courageous, because you will lead these people to inherit the land I swore to their ancestors to give them. Be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all the law my servant Moses gave you. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left, that you may be successful wherever you go. Keep this book of the law always on your lips. Meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do everything written in it. Then you will be prosperous and successful. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. For the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. So Joshua ordered the officers of the people, go through the camp and tell the people, get your provisions ready. 3 days from now, you will cross the Jordan here to go in and take possession of the land the Lord your God is giving you for your own. But to the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh, Joshua said, remember the command that Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave you after he said, the Lord your God will give you rest by giving you this land. Your wives, your children, and your livestock may stay in the land that Moses gave you east of the Jordan, but all of your fighting men ready for battle must cross over ahead of your fellow Israelites. You are to help them until the Lord gives them rest, as he has done for you, and until they too have taken possession of the land the Lord your God is giving them. After that, you may go back and occupy your own land, which Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave you east of the Jordan toward the sunrise." Then they answered Joshua, "Whatever you have commanded us, we will do, and wherever you send us, we will go. Just as we fully obeyed Moses, so we will obey you. Only may the Lord your God be with you as he was with Moses. Whoever rebels against your word and does not obey it, whatever you may command them, will be put to death. Only be strong and courageous." Eric, if you want to put that map up, just to give us a visual of where we're at here, if you can see this. So this is the promised land over here. The Israelites at this point are in this area. And this section about the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh, they have been given land on this side of the Jordan River. And so really, in theory, they have no reason to cross over, but we'll get to that in just a second. So this kind of gives us a visual of where we're at. Right now, the people are in this area. So Joshua steps into this role that Moses, this man who knew God face to face, who performed all these signs and wonders in Egypt to Pharaoh and to the people. There's never been anyone like him. Most likely never going to be anyone like him again. And enter Joshua here. So this command that we are naturally drawn to be strong and courageous, seems and feels very logical. If God is giving his leader a pep talk, I think strong and courageous seems very practical and logical, considering the circumstance. Like, you're filling some big shoes here, but be courageous, be strong. There's going to be a lot of fighting, there's going to be a lot of battles in front of you, but be strong and courageous. It's a phrase that we're familiar with. It comes through in this chapter a number of times, and it's naturally, I think, where our eyes go. And that's fine. I'm good with that, but I have a couple other questions that have surfaced in my mind to maybe take us a little bit deeper than possibly we have before. There's some things about trying to preach a familiar passage that are difficult, and one is that maybe we know everything about it. Hopefully this morning we can shed some new light on something that is very familiar to most of us probably, and particularly this phrase of being strong and courageous. Courageous, so this is how my mind works. We're going to go on the journey through my mind, as we often do. The first question I have is, what is courage? How do we define it? This is God's command to Joshua to be courageous. What does that mean? How and what is the definition of courage? If we look in a dictionary, we'll find definitions like the ability to do something that frightens one, or the mental or moral strength to venture, persevere, and withstand danger, fear, or difficulty. Courage is the strength in the face of pain or grief. And so we use courage, this word, in sentences like, he called on all his courage to face the ordeal, or he fought his illness with great courage. We know, practically speaking, what courage looks like when we see it. It's exemplified by first responders. That's the first instance that comes to probably most of our minds. It's the fireman running into the burning building, or the responder at the scene of an accident that's just with no regard for their own self, is all about saving someone else. That's courage. It's acting in the face of fear. And it's important for us, I think the key for us to grasp as we understand courage is that it's not the absence of fear. Courage is not fearlessness. Courage is the ability to act in spite of our fear. You still feel the fear, but you act in spite of that. Okay? So that's what it is. But where does it come from? Is the next question I have. So if that's what it is, where does it come from? Is courage this ability that we have to act in spite of a fear that we may have, is it something we just muster up from deep inside of ourselves? Are some people just born with it and other people aren't? Like some people just you either have it or you don't. And you have the ability to summon it from within. Or does it come from somewhere else? Does it come from somewhere else? There's a man by the name of Simon Sinek. He's a leader. I'd call him a leadership expert. He calls himself an optimist as well. But he travels. He speaks on leadership, on motivating people, that type of thing. Does a number of TED Talks, and he was asked this question: where does courage come from? And Eric, if you want to go ahead and cue that video up, his answer, the best that I know, I don't know Simon, I just know what I've read about him. He's nowhere do I find that he's a professing Christian. Nowhere does he ever link what he says to biblical truths. But listen to what he has to say about courage, and then we're going to overlay that here onto Joshua chapter 1. And I think, well, just listen. Go ahead, Eric.
I think courage is external, right? The reason someone has courage to jump out of an airplane is because there's a parachute on their back. It's the external thing. A world-famous trapeze artist would never try a brand new death-defying act for the first time without a net. It's the net that gives them the courage. The Navy SEALs are considered one of the highest performing organizations on the planet. And a former SEAL was asked, what kind of person makes it into the SEALs? And he said, I can't tell you the kind of person that makes it in, but I can tell you the kind of person that doesn't make it in. He said the star college athletes who have never really been tested to the core of their being, none of them make it in. He said the preening leaders who like to delegate everything, none of them make it in. He says the guys who show up with hulking muscles covered in tattoos because they want to show you how tough they are, none of them make it in. He said some of the guys who make it in are skinny and scrawny. He said some of the guys who make it in, you see them shivering out of fear. He said, but every single one of the guys who makes it in, when they're emotionally exhausted, when they're physically exhausted, when they have absolutely nothing left to give, somehow, some way, they're able to dig down deep inside themselves to find the energy to help the guy next to them. In other words, the reason these organizations and these people have the courage to do remarkable things is not because of their internal strength. It's because they have the absolute confidence that there is someone to the left of them and someone to the right of them that cares about them. And they all know that. And it's the quality of the relationships that we maintain, professionally and personally, that give us the courage to do difficult things.
It's not the internal strength that we muster up, but it's the confidence we have that there's someone to the left of us and someone to the right of us that has our back. The courage is external. So, back to Joshua. With that thought in our minds, here's what Joshua chapter 1, verses 1 through 6 says. After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua, son of Nun, Moses' aide, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now then, you and all these people get ready to cross the Jordan River into the land I am about to give them, to the Israelites. I will give you every place where you set your foot, and as I promised Moses, your territory will extend from the desert to Lebanon, and from the great river, the Euphrates, all the Hittite country to the Mediterranean Sea in the west. No one will be able to stand against you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, I will be with you. I will never leave you nor forsake you. Be strong and courageous, because you will lead these people to inherit the land I swore to their ancestors to give them. What is the external source of the courage that God is commanding Joshua to have? It's God. It's God. By my count, in the NIV translation, in those 6 verses, 7 times do we read the word I will, I am, I have. I, God, I've done this. I'm giving it to them. I will give you every place. I promised. I was with Moses. I will never leave you. I swore to their ancestors. It's God. Joshua isn't summoning some inner strength that he was born with that was greater than anyone else in all of Israel. Joshua is going to be courageous because of God. Because of what God did and ultimately what God is going to do. It's God. It's external. It's not something he's going to muster up on his own. And so he can courageously step in as the leader of the Israelites because God has his back. He knows God has his back. And so he can lead. This external source of courage impacts Joshua's ability to lead, as we see in the last part of the chapter, verses 16 through 18, when he's speaking to the Reubenites and the Gadites and the half-tribe of Manasseh, that those group of people that really have no reason to go over the Jordan River because their land is on that side. What do they say to him? They say, whatever you have commanded us, we will do, and wherever you will send us, we will go. Just as we fully obeyed Moses, so we will obey you. Only may the Lord your God be with you as he was with Moses. So the people essentially are saying, as long as you are backed by God, we will back you. We trust you because you trust God. We know God has your back, and so we have yours. And it allows him, and it gives him the ability to lead this group of people. The courage is not from within himself. It's backed by God. So, that's the first idea. Where does courage come from? Number one, I would suggest it's external to ourselves. And the same is true for us. The source of our courage in any particular situation is not the strength that we muster up within ourselves. It is external to us. And that external source would be God. Secondly, where does courage come from? As we've said, courage is not the absence of fear. It's not fearlessness. And really, in order to have courage, you must have fear. If there is no fear, then there's no need for courage. So fear is necessary for courage to exist. And R.C. Sproul Jr. Suggests that, along this line of thinking, that courage is not the absence of fear, but in fact the presence of a deeper fear. That courage is the presence of a deeper fear. And here's what he means by this: that those individuals who do something courageous, that we deem courageous, are doing it because there is a greater fear than the one that is presently before them. For some of us, it's the fear of failing. The fear of failure is greater than the fear of whatever it is we need to do. For instance, if you're afraid of heights and you need to climb a ladder that is high, your fear of looking bad or scared might be greater than your fear of heights in order to motivate you to get up that ladder. And maybe that involves saving someone. And that's the courageous part of it. So there is a fear that is greater than the one that is presently at hand, that motivates you to do something that you normally wouldn't. Whatever that may be. Whether it's your image, whether it's the fear of failure, you fill in the blank. But courage actually comes from a deeper fear. This too, I think, we can connect biblically to Joshua and the Israelites' experience. Joshua verse 1, now picking up in verse 7. Be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey the law my servant Moses gave you. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left, that you may be successful wherever you go. Keep this book of the law always on your lips. Meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do everything written in it. Then you will be prosperous and successful. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. In essence, who are you going to fear? Are you going to fear man or the world or the things that are in front of you, or are you going to, God is saying, or are you going to fear me? Who are you going to fear more? Keep this book of the law, keep these commands that Moses has given you always on your lips, always before you. And if you do that, you will be prosperous. So if you fear me, if you follow me, you will have success. Therefore, go courageously and fight these battles. And what we will see is that as long as the Israelites do that, they're just fine. But when they don't, it doesn't go well for them. And so, yes, the land is full of giants and armies that seem too great to overcome. But you don't need to fear, and you can enter into battle courageously as long as you fear me. Fear me and more than the fear of the people that are in front of you. That is, I don't want to disobey God more than I am afraid of going to fight that army that I think we can't beat. And so my deeper fear of God and his command to go and be courageous motivates me to do something courageous. And so, again, we have this external source, God, who has our back, that allows us to do things that maybe we normally wouldn't. And we have this deeper fear than just the present circumstance that's in front of us. And I would suggest to you as well that that deeper fear is the fear of God. And that's where we find the Israelites. This command to be strong and courageous. But what God is not telling them, as we typically would pep ourselves up, is like pull yourself up by your bootstraps, muster up all this physical strength you had. What did Simon say when he asked about who makes it into the Navy SEALs? It's not the guys who look like they should be in the Navy SEALs, like the big muscular guys who think they have all the ability to do it. No, it's the ones who recognize that they're afraid, but they've got people around them who have their back. And so there's going to, all of life takes courage. Getting out of bed in the morning takes courage, because we don't know what's going to happen. And so recognizing that God has your back, and then when he calls you to do that thing that might be fearful, that you think, I can't do that, I don't want to do that, what are you going to do? Are you going to give in to the present fear at hand, or do you fear God more than what is presently in front of you that compels us to act? So connecting this with our generation to generation theme, the challenge I would give, would place in front of us this morning is this. As we journey through the book of Joshua, that we do some self-evaluation, because there's moments in the book of Joshua where the people of Israel are specifically instructed to remember what God has done. When you get to the Jordan River, I have to think that crossing the Jordan River was much easier than going across the Red Sea. That stepping into the water of the Jordan River was a lot easier because they experienced what God did in parting the Red Sea. And so they bring those experiences with them from the past, and we do the same. Unfortunately, as I said before, we bring those bad experiences from the past with us as well, and we project those things onto God. And I would challenge you to be careful, or to consider what negative experiences you might be projecting on God when we're considering reasons for why to trust him. And that is to say that your parents might have failed you, your grandparents might have failed you, there's some long generational sin that you're dealing with now that's been in your family. Somebody might have failed you. But I can stand up here with full confidence and say that God didn't fail you. That he hasn't changed. People change. And unfortunately, there's ramifications for some of that we deal with, good and bad. But God hasn't changed. And he didn't fail you. And so what I want us to consider this morning in this space is reasons for us to be, as God has commanded, strong and courageous in the face of fear. That God has your back. Because he's had your back in the past, I'm sure. And if you take time to consider, I would challenge you to consider, where has God had your back in the past? How has he shown up that gives you the courage, the confidence to step into the Jordan River, that makes the next difficult decision or step a little bit easier because you know that God has your back? And still, even knowing that, there's this element of this deeper fear that I think comes into play as well, that I fear the wrath of God or the disappointment of God or not following in what he's calling me to do, more than I fear my inability to do something that I perceive I can't do or something that I don't want to do. And so my take from Joshua this morning would be that. That's where I want to leave us at to consider, and maybe you want to have further conversation on that in your classes and small groups or whatever. How has God had your back in the past that gives us courage for the future? Because the Jordan River is coming, Jericho's coming, there's a lot of fighting that's coming. But the command is to be strong and courageous. Why? Because I am giving you this land. I will do it. I am doing it. I promised it. It's all God. 7 times. We see it in 6 verses. And the same is true for you and I, that God, he's got your back. He's got my back. So we can be strong and courageous in the face of whatever we might face. Let's pray. Jesus, we thank you for your presence with us here in this place. We thank you for your word, for the truth that we can find in it. God, help us by the power of your Spirit, the wind, the energy of your Spirit, to make application in our own lives, in what might be very difficult circumstances where the fear is and the uncertainty is overwhelming. Recognize that all of life is courage. It's courage to stand up in school, to do the right thing in the workplace, to speak up, to speak out, to live how you are calling us as individuals and corporately to live. And we can do that courageously because we know that in spite of what fears may linger in the world, that you have our back. You've had our back in the past, and you will continue to have our back into the future. And so, God, may we step out courageously as individuals and as a church to do that which you are calling us to do, wherever our feet take us, wherever we find ourselves to be at. Let us be strong and courageous. In Jesus' name, amen.